And I wonder if people have any concept of the harm this has already done to the United States. The sanctions alone, when you start seizing the personal property of residents of a country because they're residents of the country without any due process at all, without even charging them, and you seize billions of dollars of their personal property because they're, quote, oligarchs with Russian last names. I'm sure some of them are bad people. Maybe they're all bad people. But what you're telegraphing when you do that is that the rule of law doesn't apply to you. Well, if you're the holder of the world's reserve currency and you're the safe haven for the world, all rich people in the world want to invest in the United States because it's safe, because we don't just take people's shit because we don't like them. We have a process. If you start doing that, then the rest of the world's like, wait a second, you're not what I thought you were. I want to get out of dollars. I want to, for example, form a massive global coalition of nations that are not aligned, and we'll do our own thing. It's called BRICS, and it now represents most of the world's power. That's just a fact. So, like, we just ended American dominance in a bunch of different sectors, or began the process of ending it. And I don't even think most Americans know that. Like, the consequences of what the Biden administration did in February of 2022 will be things that your grandchildren have to deal with. And we didn't never even have that conversation because it was like, oh, Ghost of Kiev, heroes, Zelensky, he's Churchill, shut up, Putin defender. Like, you can't have big issues like this and no public conversation about them, or else you'll destroy yourself, and we are. Well, lying has consequences, and of course this war wouldn't be still in progress were it not for the Biden administration abetted by the leadership of the Republican Party. So I mean there's like a direct line between the propaganda, the lying, and the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, an entire generation of Ukrainian men. I mean, Zelensky just said they're going to call up 40-year-olds. Well, what does that tell you? They're no more 25-year-olds. And I shouldn't chuckle because it's like horrible. And really, in the end, it abetted cruelty because that's what we're looking at. The people who put, and I'm not talking about your neighbors who got wrapped up in the myth of the ghost of Kiev, or we're calling it Kiev, and had Zelensky T-shirts. They're good-hearted people who thought they're on the right side. I get it. I'm talking about the people who pushed this war, who went to the Munich Security Conference, the Vice President of the United States, the Undersecretary of State, and said to Zelensky, we want you to join NATO, knowing that that was the red line of it has to be the red line for a sovereign country, period, meaning Russia. You're going to have a war if you do that. They knew that. They did it anyway. They wanted a war. And then they created, they destroyed Western Europe's economy by blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the main thing they did was destroy Ukraine. And they didn't care. I mean, that just, I don't know. I'm not an expert on war. I've seen a couple, and it means like lots of dead people who shouldn't be dead, and there's no reason for them to die. And we now know the Israelis were honest enough, as you remember, Bennett, to say over a year ago, yes, there was a peace deal in progress, and it was scuttled by the U.S. That's a massive moral crime. Like the blood of those kids is on their hands. I think that. I don't think that's an unfair conclusion to draw from the facts. And yet they're running around lecturing us about democracy and how they're on the right side of history. The opposite is true. They've committed a horrific crime, and the main victim has been Ukraine, and they're still posing as the defenders of Ukraine. I mean, it's like mind-boggling to me. I can hardly believe it's happening. What's crazy is that our media are so controlled, our news environment is so North Korean, that most Americans thought that Ukraine was going to win without, like, I don't know, consulting Wikipedia that would tell them that Russia has 100 million more people than Ukraine does. And it has such deeper industrial capacity that there's like no comparison. And it has a real army, one of the best in the world, we now know, for all of its faults. I mean, it's not the Soviet army. It is better, and it's big. So it was never going to happen. But Americans didn't know that. And that's really, I mean, it's very distressing to me because if something that big and that obvious can be unknown to the majority of our population, like what else can they pull on us? And the other thing I would say is that it's a little bit strange that the people who are advocating for more literally pointless killing have somehow seized the moral high ground from people who are calling for a reasonable peace, which will, by necessity, require accommodations. One hopes on both sides. All peace agreements do. And, some are wise and some are unwise, but that's the nature of them. It's the nature of every negotiation. But as soon as we start, and we're very good, our leaders are very good about moralizing in the most the crispest, most black and white terms about foreign conflicts, where one side is all good, the other side is all bad, and any accommodation is a moral crime. Like once you start talking like that, you're just guaranteeing perpetual war in which other people's children will die. And so if you're doing that, you're like by definition a bad person in my view. And yet the people who question you are somehow they're the bad people. I mean, it really is upside down world on this and so many other issues, but it just I never get tired of being shocked by that.